Hello and good day. My name is Jim Withers. My speech today is to tell you why I believe solitary confinement is torture. The federal and state prisons in the United States practice solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is practiced in all 50 states. Men and women are spending several years in solitary confinement. The public is not well informed about solitary confinement. The definition of solitary confinement is the placement of a prisoner in a federal or state prison in a cell away from other prisoners, usually as a form of penal discipline, but occasionally to protect the convict from other prisoners or to prevent the prisoner from causing trouble. Long-term solitary confinement may be found to be unconstitutional as cruel and unusual punishment. For instance, supermax prisons were originally designed to contain the worst criminals and those who did not adhere to prison rules, aka the worst of the worst. As of 2001, the count of inmates in administrative segregation in California was 5,982, representing an 80.2% change over time. But this number is not quite correct due to deficient files. Increasingly, the practice of solitary confinement long-term instead of its 3-month intended period in the supermax prisoners as inmate control has become the norm. The selected inmates who wear jumpsuits that differentiate them from the general population will spend about 23 hours a day alone in a cell where they are offered very little and fully monitored, as is procedure at Pelican Bay Prison, which is one of the largest supermax prisons in the United States. In order to be sent to Pelican Bay, the inmate has either committed murder, assaults, riots, threatening staff or fellow inmates, or is deemed to have gang affiliations, which has to be validated by prison staff. Solitary confinement as torture and solitary confinement is considered to be a form of psychological torture when the period of confinement is longer than a few weeks or continued indefinitely. Take the case of Thomas Silverstein. Has been somewhat criticized. Silverstein has spent the last 29 years of his imprisonment in solitary confinement as a result of him murdering a prison guard in Marion, Illinois. He is thought to have been in solitary confinement longer than any other prisoner in the world. Silverstein is currently incarcerated at the federal supermax prison in Florence, Colorado. The International Red Cross has expressed concern over significant problems with U.S. confinement techniques, and U.S. prison policies have faced mounting legal challenges. America's detention system is far below the basic minimum standards for treatment of prisoners under international law. The United States' increasingly harsh treatment of civilian prison population in supermax facilities nationwide has caused an international human rights concern. America's solitary confinement practices contravene international treaty law, violate established international norms, and do not represent sound foreign policy. Negative psychological effects have been documented, leading one judge in 2001 suit to rule that solitary confinement units are virtual incubators of psychosis, seeding illnesses in otherwise healthy inmates and exasperating illness in those already suffering from mental infirmities. Psychiatric effects of solitary confinement. Effects of solitary confinement include increasing sensitivity to stimuli, hallucinations, and other changes in perceptions, as well as cognitive problems including memory loss, difficulty thinking, impulsiveness. These effects together constitute a unique syndrome, sometimes called social sensory deprivation syndrome. In conclusion, the definition of torture includes solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is a form of deprivation. Without human contact, man starts to have several types of psychosis. The federal and state prisons in the United States practice solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is practiced in all 50 states, and men and women spend many years in solitary confinement.